Is it possible for a team to be 16 games over 500 and still be a dumpster fire? I think the answer is yes. And today we're going to talk about why. Welcome to the winning season with Seth G. I'm Seth Galligan, and today's show we're going to break down one of the biggest surprises in baseball, the World Cup group recap, around the diamond, and our winning season moment of the week. So let's jump right in. I want to start today with the World Cup. We talked about this on the last episode. Pool play was up and running. It was just a spectacle to watch. I think all the games were incredible. The environments were incredible. The atmosphere was really something to get to watch and to be a part of. And to all the lucky people that actually got to attend, I can only imagine what that was like. I want to start today talking about the biggest surprise so far of the World Cup, and I think the first one is Germany going out in the round of 32. This is three World Cups in a row. They've been knocked out in the first knockout round. I think that team used to be a world powerhouse for years. I think the talent's just not there. I like Kai Havertz a little bit, but other than that, you cross that team, and it's hard to see them, being the dominant team they once were. Now, with that being said, should they be going out in the round of 32? Absolutely not. So, very surprised to see that again. I don't think they're a team that anybody thought was really going to be challenging to win the World Cup this year by any means. But certainly, again, expected them to get a little more run in the knockout rounds. I think that leads next to what's been the biggest disappointment. And surprisingly enough, I think it was Uruguay's early exit. That's a team that, just generally speaking, is a really strong team. Certainly a team that you fully expect to get to the knockout rounds. And so the fact that they didn't even do that was really disappointing. And, they'll have to go back to the drawing board. And of course, the tough part about the World Cup is you got to wait 4 more years, right? But I think that's a team that I think there was a lot more expected out of them. And when it was all said and done, they weren't able to get it done. What's been the best match so far? So I got to tell you, Japan and Brazil was phenomenal. Brazil obviously moves on and wins a tough game. I was so impressed with Japan. I do think Brazil is a lot better than people think. I think Matheus Cunha and Vinicius Jr. up front are just kind of wreaking havoc on other teams' defenses. But Japan, they played so well. I hate to see those two types of teams have to play in the round of 32. They both deserve better. They both deserve to be deeper in the tournament. Unfortunately, Japan's going home. But if you got a chance to watch that game, it was up and down and back and forth. And Japan, certainly in the first half, I would say was the better team. But I give Brazil a lot of credit in a tough game against a tough team. They really came out in the second half and they dominated that game. They got 2 goals. And they were able to move on. But again, I hate it for Japan. Would have loved to see them get to stay around a little bit longer. I think they had a lot to offer the tournament. But hats off again to Brazil for a great second half and, kind of weathering the storm a little bit in the first half. So excited to see where this Brazil team goes. I think this is, 1 year going into the World Cup. I'm not so sure everybody thought that Brazil was really a team that was going to make a lot of noise, but that front duo is causing some real problems. I'm biased. I love Matheus Cunha. He plays for Manchester United. I just think he does so many things on the field. He's all over the place. He is absolutely just fearless in the box, and he's also the first guy to run back and defend and make a great tackle to get the ball going back the other way. I thoroughly enjoy watching him play, and it's been great to see him on the world stage. I think showing the world what he can do, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So, favorite to win. So this has been really interesting. So I've been fairly heavy on England, and I'm not sure I'm ready to change my prediction just yet. But I will say this: the more I watch this France team, the more I begin to have concerns about can England really win the World Cup. And the reason why, again, the France, they've got so many stars on that team that they can put an enormous amount of shots on goal. Their skill level at the at the front end of the field scoring is second to none. Kylian Mbappe is as good as anybody in the world. Michael Olise, they've just got so many guys on that team that are highly effective at the roles they play, and I do think that they are going to continue to. That they've been kind of steamrolling teams, and I'm not so sure that that's going to change anytime soon. And one thing I'd call out about France and I think it's always the watch out for all teams in the World Cup. The tendency is when you get to the knockout rounds is to sit back and play very, very conservative and try to get a late goal. I would just tell you it almost never, ever works. I think that's exactly what happened to the Netherlands the other day. And I think, with France, they are not sitting back playing conservatively. They are not waiting for a late goal. They are pushing forward constantly throughout the game. And I think that's a huge advantage in the World Cup. So last episode, we talked about England and the change with Thomas Tuchel and them being a more aggressive team. I think that's a huge piece. And so we'll see how, as the tournament progresses, the teams get better, the games get tougher, of course. But I think right now those two teams are teams I feel like are looking to score from the opening kickoff, which I think is a recipe for success in the knockout rounds when most people are going to play very conservative. Just don't make a mistake. Maybe you get a late goal, you get a nice bounce here and there. But I think the teams that are really pressing forward have a better chance. And again, when it's France specifically, I mean, why wouldn't you with the talent they have up front? So again, so excited about the World Cup. I've enjoyed every moment of it. It's getting better. It's going to continue to get better as we get further in the knockout rounds and teams get better and better. But so far, France has been definitely the team that I would say, if I was going to change my pick, and again, I'm not ready to commit to that just yet. France would be the team I think that looks the strongest. So more games coming up. They're every day. There's multiple games, and obviously that'll slow down as less teams are left. But man, it's been incredible so far, and I can't wait to see how the next couple of weeks play out. All right, so let's get into baseball surprises. So we started the show today talking about can a team with such a dominant record and have such a dominant season so far be an absolute dumpster fire? I alluded to the fact that I do think that is possible, and I think we are seeing that currently today with the Atlanta Braves. So I want to spend a few minutes really breaking down like what's working, what's going wrong. Should we be worried? Is this a time to panic as a fan base and looking at this team? So I want to start with, I guess, the good side of it. They have a very good record. That record still is very good just because of their incredible start to the season. They've had pretty much an awful June, one to certainly forget about. But overall, they've still got one of the better records in baseball. And let me just say this. It's not the record, or really, honestly, even the losses that are concerning me. I think what's very, very concerning is how they're losing. And I want to spend a few minutes breaking that down. So let's start with what's working, right? Well, let me just tell you, if you're not paying attention, what's working is Chris Sale. Chris Sale continues to pitch like the absolute ace that he is. You kind of feel sorry for the guy because he is not getting a whole lot of run support. His last start against the Giants, even the defense failed him, which has been a little bit of a rare thing for this team. But Chris Sale's been absolutely outstanding. And honestly, overall, the pitching has been. Now, the bullpen's been really good. Those late losses hurt more, I know, and so I think it makes all of us, including myself, question that bullpen a little bit. But the reality is that when you really get into the numbers, pitching is not the problem. Matter of fact, they're pitching when you consider all the injuries they have. You might argue the lack of starting pitching on the front end outside of Chris Sale, at least people that you would think about that have a reputation for being a 2, a 3, and a 4 starter. The reality is that they're not the problem. The pitching overall has been really, really good. So let's talk about defense. The defensive side has been really good as well. The Braves continue to be well above average defensive team. Certainly defense is going to help you when you're in a slump. It's going to win you some games. They've had some incredible moments in games this year where the defense absolutely won them some games, whether it was Eli White, Ronald Acuna, throwing guys out at home, making all the basic plays, right? You got to make all the fundamental plays. You got to make all the ground balls. You got to turn all the double plays. I mean, you've got to do, I think, what you would consider just the game-to-game things. And some of those big plays certainly make a difference. But again, defense is not the problem. Overall, this team has been a good defensive team. So that obviously leads us to the hitting, which I want to go back to the first half of last season. So the first half of last season, you looked at the Braves team and you just thought this team can't hit. They changed pitching coaches. I can tell you right now, hitting coaches. I was definitely like, I'm not sure Tim Hires is a guy that this seems to really not be working. And then the second half, they started hitting really well. Now, unfortunately, their pitching fell apart, so it didn't translate necessarily into wins and losses. So we come out this year at the beginning of the season, and our offense is insane. These guys are hitting the ball out of the ballpark, timely hitting, getting on base, scoring a lot of runs. And I begin to think, hey, you know what? Maybe I was wrong, right? Maybe the hitting coach change was good and was needed, and this team's kind of got it figured out. And then all of a sudden, we're sitting here today, going into July, and I'm like, this team looks just like the team that started the first half of last year. They are not good in situational hitting. They have not been good with runners in scoring position. They're not hitting a lot of home runs. They're putting up very few crooked numbers. And what's interesting, when you really get into the numbers, their on-base percentage is not bad. They are getting on base, and really it's not even much less than they were in the first half of the season. But their run production has been very, very, very poor. So, couple of bright spots, especially in June. Michael Harris continues to have an exceptional year. He's one of those, again, front half of last year, he was awful, has a great second half. He comes out this year and he's, struggled with a little bit of injury here and there, but overall, he has been the catalyst, and he's been the one person in that lineup, I would say, that has been consistent all year and given the Braves what they need. In June, Mauricio Dubon also had a really, really good June. Hits over 300, hits several home runs. And, he's been such an incredible trade for the Braves. And, I don't know where we'd be this year without Dubon. A bunch of big hits. But, him and Harris have really been the two that you could point to that say they've been consistent. They're getting on base consistently. It's kind of it's an every night thing. But unfortunately for the Braves in June, it pretty much stops there. that they're the only two. So Drake Baldwin comes back from an injury. I love Drake Baldwin. I think he's probably the best catcher in the game with Shea Langoliers. But he has been just absolutely atrocious since he came back from injury. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with Drake Baldwin. I think, and I'm not even so sure the Braves brought him back too early. I think that's the first thing you always think. My guess is it's a little bit of timing, maybe a little bit of rust from the injury. I'm sure Drake Baldwin will be fine, but bringing him back in the lineup, I think the very first game he hits that monster home run, and you just think, oh well, he's back to who he was, and it's been really, really bad since then. So that's not helping the situation. Obviously, Acuna continues to be out. I saw today that they're saying that there's a high probability we will not see him before the All-Star break. I think it's really, really important to get him back, but I do want to spend a minute and focus really on the middle of that lineup. So first of all, I want to talk about Matt Olson. So Matt Olson statistically is having a really good season. Again, had a great first couple of months of the season. He slowed down a little bit, but I would say with Olson, and I think it's been this way his whole career. I don't think this is anything out of the ordinary or strange. But I'd like to see a little more consistency from him. I think he needs to. He goes through these stretches where he just hits everything out of the ballpark, and that's great. But he goes through some times too where just a little inconsistent. The power usually is still there. The non-home run hitting, I'll call it, tends to drop off from time to time. So certainly they need a little more consistency from Matt Olson, kind of anchoring the middle of the lineup. Now, I think the other person that we have to talk about, as much as I may not want to, is Austin Riley. So just as a disclaimer, I love Austin Riley. He's actually from the same hometown that I am. He's one of my favorite Braves, and I absolutely love watching him play third base for the Braves in his career so far. But I will say this. Austin Riley is about as broke at the plate as I think I've ever seen him. 32 games without a home run. And he looks very, very, very lost. And I think what's really concerning is he's looked lost for a long time. And whatever Riley and the coaching staff are doing, to be just really blunt, it's not working. The results are not changing. The results are the same. So I don't know what the answer is. I do think that when you watch him, it's very, very clear he is not staying on the ball at all. The slider seems to be the pitch that any pitcher can go to at any at bat and get him out if they want to. Normally he's swinging and missing. He tends to chase it outside. But more than anything, I would just say, generically speaking, him not staying on the ball and pulling off the ball is just, so it seems to be the thing they can't get fixed. And he's had a couple of series this year. He'll go through a few days and he hits a home run or two and he's getting on base, and you think, all right, here comes the Austin Riley that we know. But unfortunately, those moments have been really, really short-lived. And then it's kind of back to this guy that's striking out a couple of times a night, struggling to make solid contact with the ball. And then as I mentioned, hitting really with no power, which I think is concerning for a guy that's always hit for a lot of power, driven in a lot of runs, and hit for a decent average. So um, the question I suppose is this: is that if those two guys get back to normal, does that make this offense? I think what we all think it can be, and what it was early in the year. I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. I'm not worried about Matt Olson. I'm not worried about Drake Baldwin. I would say that I'm worried about Austin Riley. I've been worried about Austin Riley for a long time. So we need to get, they need to get Ronald Acuna back. He needs to be the player that he can be at the highest level. And I think, that should translate, of course, to scoring more runs, which at the end is what the problem is. As I mentioned earlier, the pitching is not the issue. It's really offense. So I think the last thing I would say on that is that so what do we do here as we approach kind of the All-Star break and you start thinking about the trade deadline? So there's a couple of pieces I think that should be non-negotiable for the Braves. They need a right-handed bat, they need a bullpen arm, and they need some starting pitching, period. Schwellenbach, Smith-Shawver, Waldrop obviously is back. Again, can those guys help? Yes, I think they can. But those guys haven't pitched in a long time, and I do not think the Braves at this point want to sit back and wait. And I think adding call it a number 2 or even a number 3 starter is pretty critical. But I also think offensively you've got to do something. The shortstop position is a little bit of a train wreck. You're paying Kim a lot of money. It's just 1 year, but I just don't think you can keep putting him out there. The guy, I think he's still hitting below 100. He's not playing much anyway. And so I just think that's a position, that you've got to do something about. Or, do you put Mateo in there and just play him every day, which I think certainly an option for them. But again, I think if there's a bat available to them that can help this team, whether it's in left field, whether it's at shortstop, that they've got to do something to kind of bolster this offense a little bit. And again, I think they really need to add a starting pitcher. So I guess that leads to the last question of this is how worried should Braves fans be? I think the answer is worried. I don't think that there's any reason that I could stand here or sit here today and tell you that the Braves fans shouldn't be worried. But I also think this team's got a really good solid core. I think they showed in the first couple of months of the season what they're capable of. I think injuries have played a factor into it, but the reality is they have got to get the middle of that lineup hitting, and they've got to get them doing it consistently. And if they can do that, I think the pitching has proven over and over again that regardless of who they throw out there, we're not going to give up a lot of runs most nights. And so because of that, I think it really comes down to the hitting. And then the last thing I would say on the pitching, that I definitely want to give those guys a really strong shout out. I got to assume they go into every start thinking they got to win 3-2. And that's a really, really tough place to be as a pitching staff, and it's a lot of pressure to put on your pitcher. So more to come. I think nobody would have said that after watching the first couple of months of the season that the Braves were just going to go into this absolute tailspin. But the reality is that's where they are, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. Now, if there is one good thing for Braves fans, I will say this. I do not think this is something we're going to have to wait months to figure out. I think in the next couple of weeks, we're going to find out what this team is made of. They have had a tougher schedule. They had another West Coast road trip, which has not been kind to them. So I think over the next 3 weeks, we're going to find out who is this team. And are they the team we saw the first couple of months of the season? Or are they the team we saw in June? And I think if I'm Alex Anthopoulos, that's what's going to determine what I do here as we get closer to the trade deadline. So I'm sure there is much, much more to come on the Braves in future episodes, but right now they are definitely a mess, and hopefully they can pull themselves out of that. All right, well, let's get into Around the Diamond, which I've been looking forward to this segment all week because I want to talk about the collective bargaining agreement. So this is something that any baseball fan knows is looming over the sport, and there's a couple of things that have come out recently about what the owners are asking for, what the players are asking for. And I think it's a little bit of an interesting dynamic between the difference between what they're actually looking for. So I'm going to go through a couple of the highlights and then certainly give you guys my take on where it sits today and what I think is going to happen. So let's start with the owners. So they did two things right off the bat that I think everybody knew. They're asking for a salary cap. And then more importantly, which I think is a critical piece of the CBA, is they're asking for a floor as well, which I think is desperately needed in baseball because I think there's too many teams who owners don't spend money, they don't put a competitive product on the field, and they're benefiting from the popularity of the game. And I don't think that's really fair to the players, and it surely isn't fair to the fans. And so I love the idea of a bottom salary cap that the owners proposed. We can argue, and I'm sure we will in future episodes, what that number should be. But the fact that they put a bottom in there and a cap in there, I'll come back to the cap in a moment, but I love the floor. Second thing is earlier free agency. 5 or 6 years, depending on whether you're with your team or going to move to another team. I like that. I think it's beneficial for the players. They get to the market earlier, which means they can capitalize certainly on their value earlier, which I think is a good thing for the players that the owners are proposing. Restrictions on deferrals. As a fan, this is a non-negotiable for me. Don't want to pick on any one team, although we all know there's one team who seems to do this more often than others. This signing guys to $60 and $70 million contracts and deferring it all is not good for the sport at all. And certainly if you just want to think about, is it fair to the sport? It's not. So restrictions on deferrals. My understanding is that it would basically not allow you to defer money in general. I think there are a few little situations where it would allow it, but generally speaking, trying to get rid of this, hey, I'm going to defer this whole contract and not have it on the books. And then the last thing is that they're wanting to raise the minimum salary, which again, I think fits. The game's at a very, very popular level, a lot of momentum. The owners are proposing that the minimum salary go up. Of course, the players agree with that, so it's not a sticking point. I think it's a really good one. Now, before I get into the players, I do want to say this. Somewhere in the court of public opinion, I think it matters a little bit. And I think going into this, I see certainly both sides of it. I understand where the owners are coming from with the cap. I certainly understand where the players are coming from, that they don't want anything to do with that, which I'll get into more in just a second. But the reality is that I'm certainly watching this very closely to see which side do I think is being more reasonable, because there could be a work stoppage, and certainly me and many, many others will be looking for blame. And so want to make sure I put the blame in the right place. So let's talk about the players. So the first thing is that the players, of course, are 100% against any cap. They don't want any salary cap at all. They think it restricts the earning power or the earning potential of players. I don't think it's a bad argument, but I also think that somewhere the sport's got a breaking point. All sports do, where the money outpaces, potentially the revenue. And I'm not saying that baseball's anywhere close to that, but my point is that I understand why the players do not want any type of salary cap, but I also think that it's too unrealistic to think that smaller market teams can compete when spending is not limited. So I understand where they're coming from. I understand their point, but I'm not so sure it's really grounded in reality and what's best for the sport. And then we get into a couple things that honestly, when I read this, I was like, this can't be right, but it is. Better housing and moving reimbursements, increased meal allowances. I got to tell you all, as a fan sitting here, a bunch of guys who get paid millions and millions of dollars to play a game that I can tell you I dearly love and I'm more than willing to spend my money on. If their issue is the meal money they're getting when they travel, it's really, really hard for the fans to relate to that, or their travel reimbursement. I mean, quite frankly, the fact that Major League Baseball players with the kind of money they make today get a meal allowance when they travel, that in itself I find to be, almost humorous. And then for the players to say they want that to be more, my guess is the owners probably don't care. It's not enough to make a difference. But again, if that's what you're coming to the table with, I got to question a little bit, like, hey, what are you trying to get out of this, right? We're talking about salary caps. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. We're talking about free agency. And you guys are talking about meal reimbursement and moving reimbursements. I think that falls in a really, really bad spot from the player side. And I honestly don't know why we're even talking about it. So I think a couple of things. I think there's too many reasons for them not to figure this out. Now, on the surface, I would tell you it's highly complicated, and I'm not so sure that they can. But I do think that baseball's in such a really good place. A work stoppage is terrible for everybody. It's terrible for owners, it's terrible for players, and it's terrible for fans. Baseball's in such a good place right now. I just find it hard to believe that they will not find an agreement. But I do think that the floor salary cap has got to compensate financially for some of the actual high-end cap. Because certainly, if you put a floor in, you're already increasing players' earning ability with all the teams that currently sit below that, which is a lot of them. And so I would argue that that is going to force teams to pay more money, which of course is going to end up in the player's pocket, which I'm sure is what the owners are probably discussing when they're sitting at the bargaining table. So far in the first initial kind of passes, I would tell you that I'm certainly leaning much more toward the owners. I think the owners are making some proposals about raising the minimum salary, putting a floor in to force teams to pay players more money, which again is good for the players compared to current state. I think it's great, and I like the idea of people getting to free agency a little bit earlier because I think it gives players more power on number one where they want to play, and then how soon they can kind of cash in on their value. So again, I think those are all really positive things for the players. I get that the cap is something they want to take a stand on that they don't even want to discuss, but I think in reality, you got to discuss it, right? It's part of the conversation. So with that being said, I think they get it done, but I don't think it's anytime soon. I think this will drag on clear through the winter. I won't be surprised if it doesn't get right up to spring training and potentially into maybe a week or two of spring training. But I'm extremely hopeful that they will find a way to get it done. So more to come on that and look forward to over the winter, getting deeper into it, I'm sure, as more of the details emerge. But really cool to get to dig into some of that over the last week, and very interested to see where it goes. And if you can't tell, I'm super excited about the floor. I'm so excited for certain fan bases. I'll throw one out there like the Pittsburgh Pirates, whose owner doesn't spend nearly enough money. Incredible ballpark, good young talent. Like, go spend a little money and give the fans something to come and cheer about instead of just Paul Skeens. So anyway, more to come on that, but I'm looking forward and certainly hopeful. All right, let's get to the winning season moment of the week. I got to call out Cabo Verde in the knockout rounds. This is an island nation that no one could probably find. You got to look it up on Google Earth. It sits out in the Atlantic Ocean off the west coast of Africa. The entire country has 491,000 residents, and they actually made it through the pool play and got into a knockout round, which I think this is what, again, something I just love about sports so much. When you see these stories come out of nowhere, teams that nobody would have ever predicted could win a game or get a couple, get enough points to get into the knockout rounds, and they managed to do it. I think that's awesome. And then crazy enough, the reward is they get Argentina in the round of 32. So neat that they made it to the knockout rounds. It would be a miracle if they make it to the round of 16, but kudos to them, and a really interesting story. Again, a team that, country, quite frankly, that most people couldn't, have never even heard of. To get to the knockout round of the World Cup is pretty special. So congrats to them. All right, so looking ahead to the next week, obviously the World Cup. Continue to watch that, see what's going on. One thing we didn't have time for this week is the NBA draft and trades. Can't wait to jump into that. We'll get into that next episode. There's been some interesting developments. I think some are developing right now that we'll be able to talk about next week, so I'm looking forward to that. And of course, as always, we will spend some time going around the top stories in baseball. So before we wrap up this podcast, I do want to take a minute. News broke, I think it was a couple of days ago, that Ja Morant was traded to the Portland Trail Blazers. I think I mentioned on my first episode, I'm a Memphis Grizzlies fan. I have been since the day they moved to Memphis. And I definitely want to take a minute to say thank you to Ja Morant for all he did for the city, for the team. Their run through the playoffs a few years ago with that core was so much fun to watch. And it's interesting how quickly that team went from, hey, this team's going to contend in the West and they may win a championship, to just a couple of years later, every single one of them is gone. And I think it's a good reminder that the sports world moves really, really fast, and it rewards winning and winning right now. And when that doesn't happen, changes happen. But it's a sad day for me because I love Ja Morant. He's a basketball player I've probably enjoyed watching as much as any basketball player I've ever watched. I wish him the best in Portland. Certainly, I know the city of Memphis will always be rooting for him. And I, as a fan, while I'm certainly not going to root for the Portland Trail Blazers, I hope Ja Morant comes back this year and has an incredible comeback season. Definitely thanks. His jersey hangs in my closet. He just it hurts, but that's what makes sports great, right? Is at the end of the day our passion for it. So best of luck to Ja Morant in Portland. If he's healthy, they got an incredible player. He's just an absolute highlight reel every single night, and he's so much fun to watch. And I look forward to watching him playing on Portland as long as he's not playing my Grizzlies. All right, well, that wraps up our second podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Please make sure you subscribe, share with your friends. Find me on social media, Winning Season Seth, SG, on all your normal ones, Twitter, Instagram, and look forward to seeing you all in episode 3. Have a great night, and see you guys on the other side.